What are your thoughts on the numerous state subsidies, that we have flying around, for farmers, for businesses? And an example of what I'm talking about would be the ethanol subsidy.
I think that when it started, it was probably an appropriate thing, but I don't think we need to have the ethanol subsidy any longer. And I think there's many in the farming sector that would agree with that as well. I think they could move away from that subsidy. I think we have to be very careful. I believe there are some things that create jobs in subsidies, and I know others will say, well, the taxes are just taken. And I don't think you can make a blanket statement about that issue. The issue is, what is the most effective way to accomplish what you need to accomplish? But I will say that there's subsidies that are bad, and I think there are some that are good. I'll reference something that I think will just drive some people crazy in this room, but local government aid, it's talked about all the time. And I'm going to say it because in most communities and counties and communities, 8 or 60% of our revenue is property taxes. Some will call local government aid a subsidy, but local government aid, by and large, is made up of property tax, sales tax and income tax, which almost everybody in our communities pays for. So it really is just a revenue package. Now, I'm not telling you we need more revenue. What I'm saying is, what is the most effective way to deliver the services that we need? And I think we've talked about that. But I think you have to look at all these subsidies in different ways. Some are needed and some are not.
On the ethanol subsidy itself, probably wouldn't even need an ethanol subsidy today if we had a delivery mechanism in there to get this product that's only available at a handful of stations in a given area to the public. But on the flip side of that, we have science today telling us that ethanol itself is not the most efficient fuel that we can produce. It's not the most efficient to burn in our cars. I can allude to that as well. The cost difference, that's something you have to determine on your own vehicle, whether or not you can get farther on a $2.19 gallon ethanol in your tank, or if you can do it with $2.59 regular unleaded gasoline. But there again, a subsidy that didn't have a sunset on it. It seems like anything that is something that will take money out of the hands of the private sector never gets sunsetted, but the Bush tax cuts had a sunset on them. That's intellectually dishonest, and it's really unfortunate that something like that we have to have something like that. So subsidies are something we have to carefully take a look at individually, but I'm not a big advocate of them at all.
The question puts in mind a story that I heard years ago where Reagan was poking fun at the Democrats, where he talked about a situation where if it moves, tax it. Yeah. If it stops moving, subsidize it. Subsidies are frankly a topic where no matter what subsidy you look at, you are going to find inequities and unfairness. Just in terms of agriculture, for instance, the question comes to mind: why do farmers get subsidies and cattle ranchers don't on the federal level? Somehow, they're both raising food. I don't see why one would be helped by the government and the other isn't. So I guess I would have to say that philosophically, I am not a great lover of subsidies. They strike me as falling into the same category as the government is going to take care of us, and it's an entitlement program. So nobody has ever subsidized my business, and I've never frankly ever expected it. I don't know about Dean.
Not for me. When it comes to ethanol, you can go back to 1973 with Earl Butz on the federal side, and when Earl Butz changed the program for farms, we can see and we can track through history that was really the beginning of the end for the small family farm. Anytime government gets involved to subsidize, it's creating characters that maybe on their own wouldn't normally survive, and it creates monsters that it doesn't realize it's going to create. The subsidy creates the entitlement mentality, well, me too. And in Hutchinson, at a town hall meeting a couple of weeks ago, I listened to one business owner who said she was part of a Job Z program, and she got a lot of money invested into her business by the government to put up buildings and to hire additional employees and to buy equipment that they normally wouldn't have afforded. And now, if she doesn't get more, they're going to have to lay off more. Well, I'm telling you, that business wasn't viable. It wasn't viable. The market will show the viability of a business. A subsidy will simply hide it.
It seems like prior to tax and income, whether it be federal or state, let's talk about state, seems like our senators would go down there and argue against spending because they knew they'd have to come back and tell everybody what they'd have to spend or put in the coffers, or they'd have to find some creative way of paying for everything. What's the idea or thoughts on the state income tax to be repealed?
The question was, what's your idea of the state income tax being repealed?
Yes.
I'll
be honest. I'm sorry, what's my thought?
No, I just get it. The state income tax being repealed. I don't think it's going to happen. I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't think it's going to happen.
No, I just wondered what you would do. Would you consider doing that?
Well, I think I don't. To be honest with you, I don't like paying taxes any more than anybody else. I think we should do what we can to minimize taxes. But I don't think I would encourage to get rid of it entirely. I just want to have the least obtrusive tax package that we can on the citizens of Minnesota. The least intrusive. But I think it should come from a variety of sources, because there are some services we need to provide. But I don't think I support not having it all. I don't want to put everything on property taxes. I don't want to put everything on sales taxes. I think it comes down to a package that supports our needs.
The thing about income taxes is that it's almost a punishment for successful people. It works against what would be common sense or what would be logical, and so in order for us to, and I'd love to see that go away. You look at some of the other successful states that do not have a sales tax, or excuse me, an income tax, and I would much rather see a consumption tax here in the state, and again, see something like that promoted, and if we go along those lines, it's surely not going to hurt it's not going to hurt the income to the state by any means. The key is to not have it exceed what the consumption tax in our neighboring states is. We see that with vehicle taxes, vehicle license plate fees, and annually, people that are fortunate enough to live along the border of the state with another state, they can run across the border, or used to be able to. That tells me that our tax is too high here in the state on that particular tax. So if we have it more in line with everyone else, we're going to collect those funds, we'll capture those funds, and that's the fairest tax there is a consumption tax.
The likelihood of repealing the income tax is extremely low, and quite frankly, in terms of votes in the Minnesota legislature, we just don't have the votes. Would I support it? Yes. I have long thought that we would be much better off with a flat tax. I think we would be much better off if we reformed the Internal Revenue Code and the code regarding the Minnesota Department of Revenue for the state of Minnesota to make it much, much more simple. I would be in favor of repealing the death tax. I would be in favor of repealing the corporate tax, the corporate income tax, so that we can allow our businesses to thrive and survive. Income tax, frankly, in any form, I believe, is a regressive tax, whereas the consumption tax that Mr. Benoit is talking about is a better tax, because there you're going to catch everybody, the folks that are on welfare and the millionaires. So there are things that we can say we are in favor of and we support, but if your question is, can we get it done? Not with the votes that we have in the legislature.
We need to get rid of the corporate income tax, invite businesses back into the state, back from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I would be in favor of repealing, getting rid of the income tax. I'd be in favor of getting rid of the tax collection system. And again, going back to the earlier comment, I would like everyone in the room to pay their own tax check every 15th of every month instead of having their employers do it. Because my employees don't realize how much that hurts to write out that check. And it doesn't even hurt me that much because I know part of that was never mine, it was my employees. And I'm writing the check out and signing it for them. As soon as everyone would be able to write out their own check, I think there would be such a groundswell that St. Paul, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, with the torches and pitchforks out front, they're going to vote.
I have a question related to firearms. Today, when you go to buy a new firearm, you have to register that gun with the Fed. And it is my understanding that the only way they have jurisdiction over that is through interstate commerce. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm wondering if you guys, in working with a conservative governor, would be in favor of saying no to the federal government, saying that the gun is made here. If it's sold here, it's bought by a resident that lives here, we're not going to register this firearm with the federal government, or do you think the federal government needs to have some control over that?
Well, the registration is anti-Second Amendment, and therefore I don't agree with it. Again, based on what you're saying, within the state here especially, and guns that are for hunting and for recreational use, I can't understand why they would why there has to be that registration. Although I do follow what progressives are doing today, and that's their only means of being able to again keep some type of a stranglehold on the public when they purchase a firearm, and so. Anything that would, again, alleviate some of that, if we are able to get it done at the state level, I would sure back something along those lines. Again, I'm pro-Second Amendment, and definitely would disagree with registration of a lot of those types of firearms, especially once you get outside of the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, although there's a lot of sportsmen there, and there too they should not be strangleholded by that type of a requirement.
As a longtime member of the NRA, I'm going to answer the question by telling you a real quick story. Years and years ago, I know a man by the name of Hendrik Weber, who as a child grew up in Holland during World War II. And when the Nazis invaded Holland, the first thing they did was they confiscated all the weapons. And the reason they were able to confiscate all the weapons is because they had all been registered. And as soon as they took the weapons away, they had no way to defend themselves. And I remember talking to Henry when he came to the United States and became a citizen. And he was so adamant on the issue of don't register your guns. I will tell you that I would never, ever, for that reason alone, favor or support gun registration.
I thought it was to protect us from pheasants. I think most people nowadays think that Second Amendment has to do with hunting because our sportsmen have done such a good job of promoting that. What a ridiculous notion. That is the single tool that we have to keep a cruel government at bay. I don't like it, I don't want it, I don't ever want to see it, but I don't know that at certain points we have a choice. I will not be like Holland, I will not be like Australia or Great Britain, I will not support, and in fact, I would move for an open carry in Minnesota and get away with this concealment carry. Usually the men or women who carry the guns out in the open are not the threat to us, they're usually our protectors. And I think Mr. Jensen in the back would agree that with responsible citizens, again, understanding the proper use of those firearms, he would like to have the help at certain moments, perhaps. So that's where I would stand.
I would never support registration of firearms. And one of the things I thought was interesting is when I went to school at Bemidji in the late 70s, almost, I'd say half the boys in the dorm had a gun in their room for going hunting. And I never ever saw those guns come out improperly. Now I saw some people probably a little drunker than they should have been. But I never saw them use that. So it tells me there's a respect thing. I think the people we have to be afraid of with the guns are those that we don't want to have in the first place. So I wouldn't support registration in any fashion.
For you this evening, Dean saying that when he goes to St. Paul, you want to stand out, be kind of a maverick. I've heard Scott say that we look a lot like Democrats. I just took a little exception to that. I don't think anybody
I said that, I'll take it.
Okay.
I'm just talking about your arms and legs.
I don't want anybody here to think they look like Margaret.
Okay.
No calibers. Okay. I did hear Randy talk about compromise, and I heard Tim talk about never having the poll in St. Paul to have the House, the Senate, and the governor all in one camp. So given that as our basis, let's assume we don't have an all-Republican St. Paul. Given that, there's a lot of good luck in both Washington and St. Paul. If you could each give one example of some area that you feel you could compromise or work with the other side of the aisle.
I think there's a bill currently in the legislature which would put electronic bracelets or ankle things on folks who have been convicted of DWIs, and that is a DFL bill. That sounds like a pretty reasonable idea to me, and it is something that I would compromise on and deal with. I'm thinking it's Tom Rocovina, Representative Rocovina. I could be wrong. But we have to talk about, of course, who's going to pay for it. So that would be an example of what I would compromise on.
That's a tough one. I'll reach out to people I don't agree with, but I won't compromise on principle. I can't. We've done it for 50 years or more. We have to stop. I could probably compromise on some bill about what color the paint should be in one of the rooms in the Capitol building. You got to understand, I've not been known to have a heart of compassion. In the last 3 years, with a lot of things that we've been through as a family, I've grown much more compassionate towards other people, even my enemy. And I know sometimes if you take your enemy in, it's a very dangerous thing, but sometimes you have to take them close enough so you can understand who they are. I'm not afraid to do that, but I'm not going to budge when it comes to principle. When it comes to the Constitution, I will not move. I'll die first.
Because I think this budget deficit is so crippling to Minnesota, I think it's important that we apply our conservative values, but we start to make a difference in this. If we're at $5 to $6 billion in the next couple of years, the compromise, if we get it down to $2 or $3 billion, I don't think that's a bad compromise. We have to start to figure out what the solution is. If we stand continually and say, my gosh, I'm never going to change, that's never worked very well. It's about time we say, no, we're going to make a difference. Little by little by little, we're going to make a difference. And I really believe that the legislatures that choose to stand up and say, there's no way, no how I'm going to do it, are going to find that they're not getting anything done. In 10 years, every time that we work hard, we put our conservative values in place, we will get something done. But if we don't, we'll continue down the same path. We'll be continually complaining about how much money we don't have, instead of saying, what can we do to make it better? And I don't know that that's a bad compromise. If 3 years from now we can say instead of 5 to 6 billion shortfall, we have 2 or 3 billion, we've made big strides to doing the right thing.
I'm not against working with the other side either, but incrementally we have gotten to the point we are today. When we compromise, we've given up. The other side hasn't. But we haven't, because we haven't had true conservatives. The Republican Party for years wanted to be the big tent, and we're seeing the effects of that today. And so, they're as much at fault as the Democrats are in the mess that we're in. But when you take the conservative ideal and bring it to the arena of discussion and the arena of ideas and debate, conservatism wins every time. No ifs, ands, or buts. Conservatism never loses because it can't, because it's the right solution about 99.9% of the time. So I would be, again, willing to look at some of the bills. I think my opponent here had also made good to recognize a bill there, but there's not a lot budgetarily that we can look at as being able to brag about as far as compromising on. So I would, again, I'm very cautious in working with them, but again, I wouldn't be opposed to that, but if it doesn't pass this test of the Constitution, there's no reason for me to vote yes to it, even if I'm a minority.
Okay, I gotta say it offends me when Randy sits there and says that, how'd you get here tonight driving on the roads? The budget, 26 billion times bigger in 30 years. Obviously, that's not a government that needs to be defended from us. We need to be defended from that. If it was half that much, it'd be still too much. When I got home from the Army, I made $5 an hour. To be the equivalent of that, I'd have to get 130 bucks an hour. It's crushing us. What about the rest of you there? Are you going to defend us from that, since Randy wants to defend them from us?
I'll take exception with that, because my point was taken at this. Roads are good for all of us. I meet with businesses frequently, and the 3 things that they ask about when they come to the community is, first off, the transportation corridor. You can pretend we don't need it, but the road that a business is going to take to get their products to market is very important. That's one thing business wants. The second thing they always ask is, do you have enough electrical power to get to us? That's another thing that we need to address. Oh, you can pretend that you don't need those things, but the reality is you do. And the last thing they ask is, our waste stream and wastewater, and is your wastewater treatment plant capable of doing that? Now, that's how we're going to win this jobs battle. But let's not pretend it's not going to happen by not taking care of those things. Jobs won't automatically fall out of the sky if we don't have infrastructure in place that supports job creation, and it also allows businesses to be successful. And that's not a socialist thing. That's the best of democracy, that everybody has an access to do a good job in his business. And those are 3 things that are extremely important to us being a successful state with jobs in Minnesota.
And the key there is that monies go into those infrastructures. 20 to 25 years ago, the Democrats in this state robbed the transportation fund of highway dollars, put an IOU in that box, and eventually paid it back, but didn't put a dime's worth of interest with it. We had roads that were deteriorating over that period of time, that 6 to 8 year period, never got taken care of, and we're still fighting that. We're behind today because of that. So we've got to say no to that, the progressive ideas of saying that some of the transportation money should go to build a statue to Cora Knudsen and put it back in where it belongs. We don't have that right now, and that's what we've got to go in and, again, slice this budget. And there's no reason, you're absolutely right, that by the way, thank you for serving our country, by the way, everybody out here that's a veteran. But you need to be able to, there's no reason that budget should have grown at that excessive a rate. When you take a look at the cost of goods today, nothing compared to that, nothing, we're way behind that. You look at farm income and crops, what we're selling crops for today, even with the ethanol subsidy, where corn is still at $2.35–40. It's just ridiculous. So, again, there's no reason for that budget to have grown that way.
Mr. Heckbarth, I'm not sure or for certain what the question was anymore. Again, perhaps I have a short memory, but I'm going to try and answer this way. I'm going to go right back to the Minnesota Constitution. There are three things that I can think of off the top of my head that are mandated to be funded: education, transportation, public safety. Those are the things that our government is obligated to provide for us, and we have a right to expect that. And we are obligated to fund those items and fund them reasonably. What I have tried to point out in the handouts that I have given you is that the government has gotten away. And it has grown in terms of the money that they extract from us in the way of taxes. It has grown in the way of regulations to where we're not in control of it anymore. It's our government, and we have the right to try and take it back. And with those three exceptions, we simply need to get the government out of our way so that we can succeed with our businesses and our families.
One thing that township government does not provide is education. Two things township government does provide, one indirectly. The indirect one is public safety. Part of our public safety program is well-built roads, well-signed roads, the inclusion of various police or enforcement departments, fire contracts with the local city or the city nearest us for fire contracts for fire protection. That'd be our public safety portion. Roads, fence line disputes, things like that is our primary job. Coquito Township, we have 53 miles of gravel road. Roughly, we have 106 lane miles is what that translates to. So when Mr. Wilson doesn't think I understand what it takes to get me here, it's what I've been part of for the last 7 years, and I realize the critical nature of it. Again, the Constitution is very clear as to what we should be providing and what we should not be providing. And those things that we should not be providing are those things that are part of that excess money that we see in our budget. Those are the things that are on the table. Those are the things that need to go away. We need to provide those other three things in their form in the way that makes the most sense to the economy we're in and to the needs of the state.
Thank you. I'm going to apologize to the candidates because I'm going to pretend I'm a progressive at St. Paul here just for a second, and I'm going to change the rules after I told you what they were before. There's actually a couple more questions that some folks wanted answered. We've got a very good audience here today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you these questions, and I'm going to ask that you incorporate them into your closing remarks. So, because I'd like to still get done somewhere. I'd still like to get done around, again, 22 or 10, and then people can have time afterwards. We'll keep it open until at least 10, maybe 10. So, here's the questions I'm going to impose in your closing statement. The Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution guarantees the right to keep the government from unreasonable intrusion upon personal property. How do you feel about the use of the International Property Maintenance codes being used in city ordinances such as blight and nuisance codes? Cities are currently considering using. Is this going to keep the public safe? So, talk about the Fourth Amendment and property rights. And then also, the question is, as being the legislature, it's obviously your responsibility to pass the laws. But how are you going to determine what are good laws? I mean, what's going to be, I think the way this question was posed, what's going to be your underlying driving factor when you're making that determination? Are you going to, for the closing statements, we can just stand up in the middle.
All right. Actually, that question, I think, came from someone in Glencoe, Mrs. Thurman. She's got a great example, and I'm glad she actually asked it. We have a dilemma right now in Glencoe. We've had some talk about this international property code, and it went to our planning commission, and it failed. So then some people brought it back, and the planning commission actually made the recommendation. It's about a 5-point document, or a 5-page document, that talked about some issues with public safety, but it also had things like, you know, noise ordinances and things like that. And it had actually gone through 2 readings, and the 3rd reading would have made it an ordinance in town. So in fact, on Monday night, I came back, and the council, and this is leadership, because I know that ordinance was going to pass Monday night. I came back and I said, you know, I believe there are some pieces in this ordinance that are rather far-reaching. You can't really say what's noise to one person is not noise to another one. So that's far-reaching. There's no monitor there. So what I said to the council is I said, this should go to another place, and we should only have issues in it that deal with public safety. For instance, issues where trees hang over into a right-of-way on a public road. That's the only type of thing that should be in an ordinance, is issues that deal with public safety. Another one was wastewater running on streets. Why, some of you might go, well, that doesn't happen. Well, yeah, it does happen. And it's not a bad thing to have an ordinance that says, we don't want wastewater on our public streets. Okay? So my comment to the council was, go through this, because at this point I'm not giving a vote. But I would have vetoed the other one, probably would have got overturned. My point was come back with only those issues that dealt with public safety, and then we've got something that'll probably work. And I think most people are okay with public safety issues, if that's all they are. And so I want to thank you for this tonight. I appreciate the fact that Camp America put this together. I think it's been a great evening. You can always reach me. I'm going to go. There's my email address and everything. If you have questions, there are a lot of issues that I've been really challenged on, especially this last 6 years as mayor. I've had to do exactly some of the same types of decision-making that I'll have to do in the Senate if I get elected. But I believe if you truly look at my record, you're going to go, I think he's got the guts to do it. I think it'll make a difference. Some will say, why do we have the ordinance at all? Well, but for the fact that I would have changed it last night, it would have passed, or on Tuesday night, it would have passed. So I stopped the ordinance, and all we'll have is public safety issues. That's what it'll come back at. Thank you.
Will you honor the endorsement?
You know what? Let me ask a question to you. I want to do that. But we're just talking about rights. Is it a right that anybody can say to somebody else, you don't have the right to run in a primary?
I'm just asking. So that's a no.
At this point, I don't know. I'm struggling with this rights thing. Is that a right that you can ask somebody not to run a primary? The primary was set up so that we could nominate somebody to run as a Republican or Democrat. Okay, I understand the question, and I don't want to take on the party, but if we're talking about rights, who has the right to allow somebody not to run in the primary? We can't pick and choose the Constitution. If we're going to use it as a document, we take it all.
In answer to your Fourth Amendment question, that anything that has the term international in it scares me to death. American sovereignty and state sovereignty is paramount, and that's again a point of zero compromise for myself. There's if you had a chance to read the Minnesota Farm Guide, last month here, there's a foundation. It's called the Paragon Foundation. They promote and support constitutional principles, individual freedoms, private property rights, and the continuation of world customs and culture. And they're at paragonfoundation.org. Again, this addresses the agricultural side, but I would sure assume if you're a landowner in Minnesota, they're going to be able to provide you with information and or some help, maybe. And as far as, the other question was...
laws.
Being able to make some intelligent, informed decisions, and that's where communicating with the constituency and with the groups that I really hold high in regard, and the factual information that they provide, and researching some of this legislation before it's voted on, knowing what's in those bills. We're looking at what's going on nationally. We have people that vote on legislation legislation, they don't know what they're voting on. They don't care, they don't take the time to research it, and I would definitely, that's would have to be my number one priority, is being able to understand what it is voting on. We've heard some great ideas and solutions to what's ailing us in Minnesota tonight, and our government at the state and national level has really failed us. Government failure does not happen all of a sudden. Progressives need to lull us into a state of lethargy. When we go to vote, we somehow tell ourselves that the incumbent must be a good person if they've held that office before. Well, we're quick to pull a lever or darken the oval for something that sounds very good. I'd like to convey to you that the days of buying votes and hoping is coming to an end. And if elected, not going to the Senate to send home windfalls from pork barrel spending, and going to try and get a handle on this out-of-control spending that's going on. And of course, along with out-of-control spending comes tax increases. And if no one's there to stop it, and again, at least be a no vote against it, and possibly get another group of people with you, and that's where you folks come in, is to be able to get some conservative majorities in the Senate and the House, hopefully, and hopefully get a good conservative governor. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for being here this evening. Thank Camp America for making this evening possible. And I want to thank District 18 Senate Committee for their work. And again, fielding some outstanding candidates here this evening. And thank you. God bless you.
First question that I wrote down involved the Fourth Amendment. Fourth Amendment in the federal Constitution is an amendment that deals with criminal law, and it guards the citizens against the government coming in and searching their homes and their private property without previously having secured a warrant. It is a constitutional right that we should hold very, very dear, very, very dear. And like all portions of the Constitution, should be strictly enforced. The Constitution is not a document that lives and breathes. It's like any other law. It means exactly what it says and should be enforced accordingly. Property rights. Property rights deal with questions of eminent domain. And eminent domain is the public taking of private property for a public purpose. Whether we like it or not, it's in the Constitution and it is allowed. What we have to do is define what is a public purpose. When I was in the legislature, I very strongly supported and helped to get passed some reform on eminent domain laws. And the two provisions of that reform that I remember the best was the business of a government entity passing a regulation which has a direct effect on property rights. Planning and zoning laws is the best example I can give you. And if the government is going to do that and reduce the value of your property by reason of that regulation, that inverse condemnation should be paid for by the government. The other provision that I remember pushing for very hard is the idea that the government can come in, take private property, claim it's a public purpose because the government feels it can transfer the private property to another private property owner and they can do better with that. Maybe make higher real estate tax payments, I don't know. But that's a provision that I don't think that the Constitution ever thought about, where we were going to allow the government to come in, take private property, give it to another private property owner because they can do better with that property than the previous owner. And so I supported that resolution also. I've talked too long, I'm out of time. I apologize. Good laws, I'll do it very quickly. Got to follow the Constitution. They have to be well crafted. They have to not have unintended consequences. And if you're going to support those laws, they've got to be needed, and they can't violate your core principles. Thank you very much for having this. I want to thank you for inviting us. I've enjoyed fencing with the candidates very much. And I'm easy to find in Hutchinson. You can hit my website, call me up, send me a letter, an email. I'd be more than happy to visit with you at any time. Thank you very much.
Number one, listen fast. I have a black enclosed trailer. I had a neighbor for a while who was a renter who had a black enclosed trailer. The neighbor was a thief. I had the same exact looking trailer as my neighbor. Wright County Sheriff's Department, a guy who was a year older than me, who is an officer in the department, took it upon himself with another officer one night to come onto my property and inspect my trailer without my permission, without a warrant. I have a name for him. He's a trespasser. And when I see him, whether he's in uniform or not, that's my name for him. I have no respect for him. He had no respect for the law. When it comes to the Fourth Amendment, this ties directly back to the Second. It ties back to so much of what our laws are and so much of what our Declaration of Independence was. When it comes to blight and nuisance, I'll tell you stories about that, dealing specifically with Wright County in different planning and zoning meetings that I've been at where they were dealing with blight and nuisance. And so many times I've left the meeting and I thought we should make a motion with the commissioners or through the commissioners to call it Pretty County instead. Because they literally go in and they take over people's properties if they come in for a permit to do certain things, and they require them to pretty up their property so that it looks presentable to the people who sit on the board. It's not right. Good laws come from good history. Good laws come from the Bible. Good laws come from our founding fathers. If we don't know our history, we will not maintain good laws. Good laws also come from a virtuous people. If we lose our morality, we will not have good laws. As you can see, if you look through our revisor statutes, we have far too many laws, and not many of them are good anymore. We have one in particular, thou shalt not kill. Seems to be a good one. It seems to speak for itself, but we have how many laws now that deal with that? Same thing with thou shalt not steal. There's an answer to those two questions. Beyond that, you're going to find in me a candidate that's a little bit different than the other three up here. Each man has his strengths. What you've got to decide is which one has the best strengths for the time that we're in. I'm in township government for 7 years. I sit at a table across from people and we deal with the law. Every month, or a couple times a month, we deal with the law in that regard. The elevated places where law comes from, I don't necessarily have the same amount of respect for because it's out of touch with the people oftentimes. I own a business that operates in every single township and every single town in the 18th Senate District. No one else up here has the experience I do in reaching to all of the people in our Senate District and about 40 miles beyond. I have my finger on the pulse of what's going on every day. We have jobs going everywhere in Senate District 18 today and tomorrow, and we're dealing with those people. So, I need your help. I need delegates on the 13th, and I need votes come November. And if you would like to help, you've got my contact information. I appreciate your time tonight.